But let's move on, because Melbourne, of course, is the home of AFL football. But these days, it also seems to be the home of every crazy left-wing lunatic, from anti-Israel protesters to anti-Australia protesters to anti-women protesters. Last week, anti-war. The list goes on, James.
It goes on and on. Hundreds of rabble-rousers gathered in the Melbourne CBD to protest the Land Forces Weapons Expo, and these self-proclaimed pacifists turned out to be anything but, assaulting police and vandalising property.
You can see it here. Here you go. They're quite literally throwing things at the police as they're trying to do their job.
Yeah, that was really difficult to see.
Yep, so they're still just cutting into the cement now, Pete. So a bit of a situation here at the moment.
Yeah, disgraceful. But get this, Victorian taxpayers will be forced to cough up $30 million to pay for the police operation that kept protesters at bay for that 3 days of the expo.
$30 million. That's incredible. And on top of that, it's understood 12,000 rostered policing shifts had to be pulled away from their regular duties across Victoria to police these peace protesters.
And this is what bothers me the most, is that Victorian police have been pulled off their regular duty to deal with every single one of these idiots. $30 million of taxpayer funds going towards trying to sort out this mess. But if you look back at the pro-Palestine protests we've seen over the last few months, there were some statistics back in January, James, that found that the total cost of policing these reached more than $3 million. And that was back in January. That was 9 months ago. So can you imagine what that total is right now? But look, I, like many of us, watched on a lot with frustration at those protests last week, not just because, of course, horse poo was thrown at police officers, there was acid thrown at their faces, manure was thrown at the horses, actually hurting them. But I was upset about how our values are being ripped apart by these people. And, you know, you don't want to speculate, but I would say a lot of these were Australian born. They look young Aussies, born in this country. And you just got to think, how on earth have they become indoctrinated?
They've been through our education system, Danica.
They've been through our woke education system. They have been indoctrinated to hate this country. They think that we are the enemy. If you look at some of the posters, the flyers advertising, it said the colony will fall. Our Australian colony, not bringing down Hamas the terrorists, not Iran, not China, not dangerous regimes. They want this country to fall. Their moral ability has been so clouded, James, they've got no idea who the enemy is and who is not.
Yeah, indeed. And for poor Victorians, I mean, the two things about Victoria that we know, Victoria has no money and Victoria has a fairly high crime rate. So here they are spending an absolute fortune on policing these protests, just 3 days of protests. You know what I was wondering? $30 million. Do you reckon you could build another wing on your jail in Melbourne for $30 million?
What, lock some of these people up? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a preemptive strike, I reckon. But what amazed me was the way that the Greens were promoting these protests too. Their Foreign Affairs spokesperson, can you believe the Greens have a Foreign Affairs spokesperson? God help us, Jordan Steele-John. He was promoting and encouraging people to go along to these protests. And, of course, David Shoebridge went down to the protest and had this to say.
I have made it clear in multiple interviews in Parliament, just then in Land Forces, that mine is a party whose core pillars include peace and non-violence. We say there's no place for violence in politics. We say there's no place for violence in public gatherings. But we call out as well. We call out as well the extreme violence that came from the Victorian police. This is not Chicago 1968. This is Melbourne in 2024.
No.
It just begs the question, if the Greens are a party of peace, why do so many of their supporters resort to violence? Didn't answer that one.
No, he didn't answer that one. But I love how he said, no, we do promote peace. We promote peace. But the police were brutal. Did he watch any of the vision of the police officers being pelted with all sorts of items, canned food, or the fact that the animal... I mean, don't they love the animals? I thought they love the environment. Aren't they number one supporters of animals and the environment? Well, the horses were injured in this, but no, you won't hear that from the Greens.
Do you know one Greens MP in Melbourne retweeted somebody else's tweet saying, had the police not been there, there wouldn't have been any violence. So that's what the Greens think should happen. Just have the police abandon Melbourne to the Greens, and then you would have a socialist utopia.